I've been a dumb artist before, just signing shit, just getting, because they get you with the money. You gotta think, you 20 years old, these folks like, look, you got a hot song, let me give you $2 million. But then I'ma own you. See, cause at first, when I first came in the game, well, you got $2 million for me? Man, run it. Publisher, you got $5 million? Run it. Not really reading the terms, not really understanding, and then your lawyer ain't gonna tell you, your lawyer gonna tell you what you gotta do, but I feel like if you build with your lawyer, like I talk to my lawyer day to day, when I'm asking questions, and he know like, I'm gonna ask this question, and I need you to break it down into a way that I can understand, so I understand what I'm signing up to, because I've been a dumb artist before, just signing shit, just getting, because they get you with the money. You gotta think, you 20 years old, these folks like, look, you got a hot song, let me give you $2 million. But then
This one didn't leak quietly. It didn't sneak out in a court filing or get buried in an interview nobody watched. It blew up loud, reckless, and impossible to ignore. Offset went off, and suddenly Wack 100's name was trending next to. One word nobody ever wants attached to their reputation: finesse. We're talking millions. Allegedly, the kind of number that makes accountants sweat and friendships evaporate on sight. One minute, it's business as usual. The next minute, Offset's frustration spills into public view, and the internet does what it does best: pauses, gasps, and refreshes the feed like it's waiting for the next episode to drop. Because this wasn't just anger, this sounded personal, calculated, like something that's been simmering behind closed doors finally boiled over. And when a rapper with Offset's profile starts talking about money going missing, people don't just listen. They start connecting dots they didn't even know existed. Wack 100 is no stranger to controversy. Offset is no stranger to success. Put those two names in the same sentence with the word millions, and suddenly, this isn't rap beef. It's a financial thriller that makes the Kardashians look like amateur accountants. The reason this accusation hit like a brick through a tinted window is simple. Offset doesn't talk like someone guessing. He talks like someone who went back through the paperwork, replayed the conversations, and finally realized the math wasn't mathing. When you hear that tone, it doesn't sound like rage. It sounds like clarity arriving late and angry. Wack 100's name being attached to the word finesse poured jet fuel on an already lit situation, not because anyone proved anything in that moment, but because Wack's public image has always lived in the gray area between power broker and professional instigator. Loud opinions, big energy, zero fear of confrontation. That kind of persona makes people assume access, and access makes people assume opportunity. So when Offset suggested millions slipped away, the internet didn't ask if it was possible. It asked how long it had been happening. That's the uncomfortable part. This didn't feel like a misunderstanding over percentages. It felt like someone realizing they trusted the wrong voice in a room full of contracts. And if you've ever watched artists navigate the industry, you know that room is always crowded with people who swear they're helping while quietly invoicing on the side. The timeline immediately went into reconstruction mode. People started digging into when Offset and Wack's paths crossed, what deals were rumored, what roles were ever implied, and where money usually gets messy. Not facts. Patterns, the internet's favorite substitute for proof. Offset supporters leaned hard into the idea that this wasn't a rookie mistake. This wasn't a naive artist learning the ropes. This was someone seasoned enough to know when a situation crosses from confusing into suspicious. They argued that nobody risks their reputation by throwing out numbers like millions unless they're confident something went sideways. Skeptics weren't convinced, but they weren't dismissive either. They framed it as industry paranoia, finally boiling over. In their view, success magnifies mistrust. When money multiplies, everyone around you suddenly looks like a potential suspect. That doesn't mean someone actually stole anything. It means trust erodes faster when stakes get higher. But here's what pushed this past casual debate. Offset didn't sound speculative. He sounded done. That difference matters. People replayed his words, looking for hesitation. There wasn't much. No maybe, no I think. Just the implication that whatever happened, it wasn't accidental. And once intent enters the conversation, everything escalates. Wack 100's reputation complicated things further. This is someone who thrives in public chaos, someone who speaks loudly and often, someone who never shies away from inserting himself into other people's conflicts. That doesn't make someone guilty, but it does make silence louder when allegations start flying. Early responses didn't calm anything down. Energy without explanation only added to the sense that something real was unfolding behind the scenes. If this was nonsense, people expected fireworks. If this was misunderstanding, they expected details. What they got instead was posture, and posture is what people read when facts aren't available. The internet immediately dragged in past industry stories, not to prove anything, but to remind everyone that money disputes are the industry's oldest genre. Managers, middlemen, consultants, fixers, people whose job descriptions sound vague, but whose bank accounts aren't. Artists have been finessed before, loudly, quietly, legally, illegally, and sometimes in ways that don't show. Up until years later, that history made the allegation feel familiar, which is dangerous. Familiarity breeds belief faster than evidence. Memes kept pace with the outrage. Screenshots of Offset mid-sentence captioned with jokes about missing commas in bank statements. Clips of Wack mid-rant reframed as when the audit hits. People laughed, but beneath the humor was a real question. If someone with Offset's resources can get played, what does that say about everyone else? The conversation quickly shifted from personalities to systems. People weren't just asking if Wack 100 finessed Offset. They were asking how often money moves without artists fully understanding where it's going. How many hands touch a dollar before it lands where it's supposed to? And how many of those hands are protected by confusion? That's when this stopped being gossip and started feeling like an industry mirror. Nobody wanted held up. Offset's frustration resonated because it touched a nerve artists rarely expose. Publicly, nobody wants to admit they might have been outplayed. Success is supposed to mean control. And the idea that millions could slip away unnoticed threatens the illusion that money equals power. Wack 100's defenders leaned into the idea that he's too visible to run quiet schemes. They argued that his personality doesn't match covert financial manipulation. According to them, if something went wrong, it was miscommunication, not malice. Deals get messy, roles blur, expectations shift. That doesn't always mean someone got robbed, but even those defenses came with a caveat. The caveat being that business clarity matters. And if clarity wasn't there, that's a problem whether intent was criminal or not. Offset didn't frame this as confusion. He framed it as loss. That distinction is what kept the fire burning. As hours passed, the accusation evolved in the public mind, not in detail, but in gravity. People stopped treating it like an outburst and started treating it like a revelation delayed by patience. They assumed this had been simmering, discussed privately, possibly ignored, until the only option left was to go public. That assumption may or may not be fair, but it's powerful. Because once the public believes something was hidden, they become obsessed with uncovering it, okay? And every vague response, every half-denial, every deflection feeds the belief that there's more beneath the surface. By the end of the day, no documents had leaked, no contracts were shown, no numbers confirmed. And yet the narrative had already taken shape. Offset wasn't just angry. He was portrayed as someone reclaiming control. Wack wasn't just loud. He was portrayed as someone whose proximity to money suddenly looked suspicious. This wasn't the explosion. This was the fuse. The real chaos would come from reactions, from allies choosing sides, from silence being interpreted as strategy, from noise being mistaken for truth. Once the accusation breathed outside its original bubble, the timeline didn't just react, it mutated. What started as one man venting about missing money turned into a crowdsourced audit powered by speculation, screenshots, and confidence no spreadsheet could survive. Everyone suddenly had an opinion, and half of them sounded like they'd just passed a crash course in forensic accounting. Reaction videos popped up like mushrooms after rain. Creators slowed down clips, rewound sentences, and paused mid-word like the truth might leak out if they stared hard enough. Every eyebrow raise became telling. Every pause got labeled suspicious. People weren't listening anymore. They were interpreting, which is how rumors graduate into narratives. Memes arrived right on schedule. Because nothing spreads faster than money jokes with a side of scandal. Screenshots of Offset looking unimpressed turned into captions about checking the books. Clips of Wack mid-rant got reframed as when the numbers don't add up. The jokes landed, but they carried weight. You don't meme about millions unless the idea already feels plausible. The fan bases went to war. Offset supporters argued that artists don't casually torch bridges over imaginary losses. They pointed out that public accusations invite legal smoke, and nobody steps into that unless they're convinced something went wrong. To them, this wasn't drama, it was overdue accountability dressed as frustration. On the other side, Wack's defenders pushed back hard. They framed the accusation as a misunderstanding inflated by internet theatrics. They said loud personalities attract loud assumptions, and that business disputes happen without anyone being a villain. Their angle was simple. Proximity to controversy doesn't equal guilt. But even they admitted one thing: the optics were ugly. Celebrities chimed in, without naming names, which somehow made the situation louder. Subtweets about counting your circle and knowing who eats off your plate flooded feeds. Nobody pointed fingers directly, but the timing did all the talking. When industry figures speak in metaphors, it's usually because they want to be heard without being quoted. The conversation took a sharper turn when people started asking how money could vanish at that scale. Not accusing, just wondering. Management fees, consulting cuts, finders, percentages. Expenses that compound quietly. The industry has enough gray areas to hide a parade, and the public started realizing that finessed doesn't always mean a masked robbery. Sometimes it's death by 1,000 invoices. That realization hit home for a lot of artists watching from the sidelines. You could feel the empathy shift. This wasn't just Offset versus Wack anymore. It was artists versus opaque systems. The fear that success doesn't immunize you from confusion, it multiplies it. Wack's energy didn't calm the storm. Anything, it sharpened it. Loud responses without granular detail gave critics exactly what they needed to keep guessing. Defiance reads differently when money is the subject. Confidence can look like control, but it can also look like dismissal. And dismissal never plays well when the audience smells blood. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to what usually goes wrong in deals like this. Not to prove the accusation, but to normalize the idea that losses can hide in plain sight. They talked about trust being outsourced, paperwork being delegated, and the dangerous assumption that success equals oversight. The takeaway wasn't that someone definitely got robbed. It was that getting played is easier than people think. Pop culture analogies went wild. People compared this to celebrity divorces where the real fight isn't love, it's assets. Others likened it to a heist movie where nobody knows the vault was opened until the balance reads 0. The comparisons kept things entertaining, but they also kept the heat on. What really escalated the moment was the lack of closure. No clean denial, no receipts. No calm sit-down that killed the rumor. Just posture, perspective and a lot of confidence. The internet doesn't do well with unresolved tension. It fills gaps with imagination. And imagination doesn't respect fairness. As the hours stretched into days, the narrative hardened. Not into a verdict, but into suspicion. People stopped asking, did it happen? And started asking, where would it happen? That's a dangerous pivot. It turns curiosity into conviction without the inconvenience of proof. Industry insiders stayed publicly neutral, which was louder than any hot take. Silence from people who usually love a microphone suggested caution, and caution in scandals. Like this reads as awareness. Nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of a story that might grow teeth. Offset's tone continued to resonate because it stayed grounded in loss, not theatrics. He didn't perform outrage for laughs. He communicated frustration like someone who'd already argued in private and got nowhere. That tone matters. It's the difference between noise and credibility in the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, Wack's persona became a double-edged sword. The same bravado that built his reputation now amplified scrutiny. Loud confidence can dominate a room, but it can't answer questions it refuses to address. And the longer those questions linger, the heavier they feel. By now, the discourse wasn't just about two men, it was about trust economics. Who controls the flow of information? Who benefits from complexity? Who notices when a percentage becomes a pattern? Artists shared stories anonymously. Fans connected dots irresponsibly. Both fueled the same fire. The algorithms feasted. Every clip, every reaction, every meme fed the machine. Lives discussing. The accusation went live to discuss other lives discussing the accusation. The loop tightened. Context thinned. Certainty pretended to exist. What made this phase especially volatile was the audience's appetite for a twist. They weren't satisfied. With explanations, they wanted receipts, numbers, timelines, a smoking gun. And in the absence of any of that pressure mounted on everyone involved to blink first. This wasn't the peak. It was the pressure cooker. It's a point where reputations start to creak, not because of evidence, but because attention doesn't let go. The moment where silence becomes strategy. And strategy becomes suspicion. And that's when people realized something uncomfortable. Even if nothing illegal happened, even if this ends in a quiet clarification, the damage wouldn't rewind. Because once millions are discussed in public, trust never returns to factory settings. The story had moved past anger and into consequence. And consequences, unlike tweets, don't delete themselves. When the noise finally dipped, that's when the consequences started to breathe, not explode, not trend. Breathe, because money allegations don't need a verdict to change relationships. They only need doubt. And doubt had already moved into the room, unpacked, and made itself comfortable. The first thing that shifted was trust. Quietly, subtly. The kind of shift you don't notice until conversations feel shorter and answers feel rehearsed. Offset didn't need to keep talking for his point to land. The accusation had already done its job. Once millions are mentioned publicly, every private interaction afterward carries tension. Even if nobody says a word about it, public perception didn't swing like a wrecking ball, it's tilted like a floor that suddenly isn't level anymore. To some, Offset looked like someone finally refusing to swallow a loss just to keep the peace. To others, he looked like an artist airing business grievances too publicly. But almost nobody saw him as confused. That detail mattered. Wack 100's image absorbed the hit differently. Not because anything was proven, but because reputations built on volume struggle when credibility is questioned. Loudness can dominate conversations, but it can't close books. And the longer this lingered without clean resolution, the more People started treating every future rant as part of the same story. The industry reacted the way it always does. When money disputes go public, carefully, people stopped naming names. Meetings happened without announcements. Allies stayed neutral. That kind of behavior doesn't signal guilt or innocence. It signals risk management. Nobody wants to be collateral damage in a situation that might escalate. What became clear was that this wasn't going to end with a dramatic reveal. There was no leaked contract waiting to drop, no sudden confession, no courtroom episode. This was the kind of fallout that reshapes dynamics without headlines. The kind that lives in who answers calls and who doesn't. Offset's brand didn't collapse. If anything, it hardened. Fans respected the refusal to stay silent about money. In an industry where artists are often expected to take losses quietly for the sake of relationships, speaking up looked like control, a chaos. Control, but that control came with a cost. Public accusations don't disappear. They linger in Google searches, comment sections, and future interviews. Every success now carries a shadow question. Not loud, just present. And presence is powerful. Wack 100's situation was more complex. He thrives in controversy, but financial controversy plays differently. Beef can be spun, money sticks. Even without proof, the association alone invites scrutiny. And scrutiny changes how people listen. Every explanation sounds defensive. Every joke sounds like deflection. That's not judgment. That's optics. The broader impact rippled outward. Artists watching this unfold didn't just pick sides. They took notes, quietly, about contracts, about representation, about who handles what and why clarity matters more than loyalty. This moment didn't scare people. It reminded them. The conversation slowly shifted away from who did what and toward how does this keep happening. That's where the story gained weight. Because once the focus moves from individuals to systems, nobody feels fully safe. Systems don't get canceled, they get questioned. And questioning is uncomfortable for everyone involved. The internet eventually moved on, as it always does. New scandals, new names, new outrage cycles. But this one didn't vanish. It stayed bookmarked, referenced, brought up whenever money and trust came up in the same sentence. That's how reputational damage actually works. Not with explosions, but with context. Nothing legally ended here. Nothing publicly resolved. And that ambiguity is exactly why this situation mattered. Because unresolved stories invite future chapters. The next disagreement. The next interview. The next time either name trends for unrelated reasons. This will resurface quietly in the background. Offset didn't need vindication to make an impact. He needed acknowledgement that money disputes aren't weakness. They're reality. And that acknowledgement alone challenged an unspoken rule in the industry. Keep business quiet, no matter the cost. Wack 100 didn't need a conviction to feel pressure. The conversation itself altered the temperature around his name. And in industries built on perception, temperature changes everything. The final takeaway wasn't about who was right. It was about what happens when trust fractures publicly. You don't go back to how things were. You move forward with adjustments, with caution. With distance, this story didn't end. It paused, and pauses in scandals are rarely empty. They're loaded with memory, with screenshots, with assumptions waiting for confirmation. Whether that confirmation ever comes doesn't change the fact that the narrative has already shifted. The internet didn't crown a winner. It rewrote expectations, because once millions are questioned out loud, nobody involved gets to pretend the math doesn't matter anymore. If you're still here, you already know This wasn't just industry drama. This was one of those moments that makes people check their circle, reread their contracts, and suddenly realize silence can be more expensive than noise. And if this story made you uncomfortable, good. That's where the real conversations start. Now, don't just watch and disappear. Drop your take in the comments. Was Offset exposing a real finesse? Or did business confusion explode into public chaos? Is this about betrayal, bad paperwork, or the kind of industry math nobody explains until it's too late? Say it with your chest. This comment section is where the uncensored debate lives. And smash that like button like it owes you money. Dodged accountability and still had the nerve to ask for loyalty. That one click tells the algorithm we're not here for sugar-coated narratives or fake peace. We're here for the raw truth when the money starts talking. Hit subscribe if you're tired of headlines that stop right before things get uncomfortable. Because on this channel, we don't just react, we break down the power plays, the contracts, and the quiet moves nobody wants to explain on camera. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next fallout, the next accusation, or the next time the industry pretends to be shocked by something that's been happening for years. Scandals don't end, they evolve. Because right here, we don't worship clout. We question the cash. We don't pick sides blindly. We follow the trail. This is the rap truth, where money gets audited, narratives get exposed, and no one gets a pass when the math doesn't add up.